recording here. Okay, so we are in Siman Kuf 100, and we're talking about Briah. Or actually, my Hebrew friends call it Briah, which makes a lot of sense, Briah. But Briah is sort of a general term. I was trying to argue with it that it's better to call it Briah just to differentiate it from Briah. Briah means a creation. Everything, but it kind of does mean a creation unto itself is kind of the idea. It's a creation unto itself. It's a thing that was a specific creation. So I added actually to the source sheet that I sent out two more sources which are mentioned by everybody all the time, and I guess we should see them. So let's start with if you look on my source sheet, it's Makot, or if you want a Gemara better, I suppose, Yud Gimel and Makot Amud Aleph. Alice, you want to read? You want to read? I'm actually quoting a Mishnah here.
I'll give it to read, but where is it on the source sheet? In the source sheet?
It's the new source sheet that I sent out just today.
It's okay. It's a different one than the
sometimes
one
I do that.
So
I send you a revised one.
Okay,
and then it's
okay,
good
sure.
to
So
use the revised one.
I've got the old one, so I think it's better if someone else reads it, and I'll just find it in between.
Alan, you have the new one? It's basically exactly the same.
Okay, and sorry, I muted. Okay, got it. Man 18. The Elohim Elokin. Kama
So I skipped. So here I skipped all the whole list here of the people that get whipped, and then the Mishnah goes on.
How much do you have to eat from tevel to be chayav? Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol shehu v'chachamim armim kazayit. Amar lan Rabbi Shimon, Yatem modim li be'ochel nemela Kol shehu chayav. Right? So Rabbi Shimon responds to the chachamim, but don't you agree with me that someone who eats an ant, whatever amount, that person is chayav? Amar lo mipnei shehi kebriata. Amar lahen afchita achat kebriata. So they respond to him. Well, an ant's different. It's like a birya. It's its own creation. And he says back to them, but also a single piece of wheat is a birya.
Right. So this whole issue of kazayit versus less than a kazayit. So because in the Malah is less than
birya yet.
Oh, say again.
Just that it feels like they haven't gotten the language of birya yet, right? Like the kabriata, yes. Right? It is like in the state it was in its creation.
Yes,
right, exactly, right.
Revolution would yell at me and say it's yes. There's no halacha category of birya that has yet been imposed and being in that.
Right, it's just kibriata. It is as it was created. It is like God didn't create a half an ant. He created. I have to say a joke. John Cleese may have created a half a bee. Who gets that reference? Nobody gets that. There's a song, Eric the Half a Bee. Look it up. It's very funny. Anyway, there is a half a bee, but God did not create a half an ant. It's kibriata. It is the way it was created. So he says, well, then Hita, also you should agree with me that by Tevel, you could also be not with a kazayit. It could be with one piece of Tevel. And that's the Mishnah. So, Alan, read the Gemara now sort of kind of brings a version or quotes the Mishnah and adds a little bit to it.
Okay. Tznan, Amar Lam Rabbi Shimon, Yatem modim li be'ochel mela kol shehu chayav. Amar lo, mipnei kebriata. Amar lan, af chita cha kebriata. Chita in kemach la. Okay, chita.
So that's the end of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is saying chita, yes.
Right. The Gemara is now jumping in and glossing and saying, Rabbi Shimon would think that a chita is is kibriata and kemach is not? Question mark.
In other words, we're asking, do you mean to say, does Rav Shimon mean to say that when he said tevel of kol shehu, when he said that was only if you ate a whole grain of wheat, kita in kemach, but a half a grain, a ground grain, no, you would not be chayiv. Is that what Rav Shimon meant? It's kind of a question. And the answer is, in other words, which didn't seem to be what Rav Shimon meant to say. It seemed to be Rav Shimon saying anytime you eat any amount of tevel, you're chayiv. Doesn't matter whether it's whole or not whole.
Right.
So the Gemara answers for him.
The Divraham Kamar, he was speaking to them according to their own opinion.
Right. He didn't really believe that. He was just saying according to their shita.
Right. But for me, Rabbi Shimon, afilo kamach nami. Elav l'dietchu oduli mihat d'chiyata achat kibriyata. But for you guys, you would also agree with me that chita is the single piece of chita is like it was created. The Rabbanan, what would they say? Briat neshama chashiva, chita lo chashiva. Right? A living creation is considered consequential, but a single piece of grain is not.
Right. Okay, so here we have, the term. Well, we don't have yet the term Briah. Well, we do. We have Briat Neshama Chashuva. We take account of something that was created with a soul or with life. But chita was not created with life. So therefore we don't take account of it. I think that's what chashuva means here. Do we take account for it? Do we consider it an isser? Do we value it as something that's forbidden, even if there's not a kazayat there? So therefore an ant would be forbidden because it has a soul, and a wheat would not be forbidden because it doesn't have a soul. Okay, so that seems to be like that's what the Rabbanan hold, according to the Gemara, that you need to have a soul. Okay, so here, maybe Alice, you want to read the next one? This is Chulin. So I'm saying we're sort of building up the concept of Briah. Now we've gotten this idea that it's got a soul and that it's whole.
גיד הנשא שנתבשל עם הגידים, בזמן שמכירו בנותן טעם, ואם לאו, כולן אסורים, והרוטב בנותן טעם. So that גיד הנשא, which was cooked with other gidim, in the time that we can identify the גיד הנשא, so it's if we feel the taste in the pot, and if not,
No. Well, Bizman, I would first of all translate a little bit, but not in the time. How else could you translate it?
When,
in a case.
If in a case, okay. If when, okay. In a case where we can identify it, so it's if the food has a taste of it, and if we cannot identify.
Wait. So what does it mean? Wait, if you can identify it, what do you do?
So if I would feel the taste, so it would be forbidden.
No. So there's a step in the middle there.
Okay.
If you makir, this is like a code word. Whenever
like
we see the word,
I can take it
exactly. Whenever you see the word makiro,
like
it means remove it.
Yeah,
if
sure.
If you identify it, then obviously you remove it, and then the Gemara goes on, but no tentam, and then we're only concerned about its flavor.
Right. Yeah. No. So that's what I meant. Like, make her identify that I just know what it is and take it out. Okay. And if not, so everything is forbidden. If I cannot identify it, so I cannot take it out, and therefore everything is forbidden.
What's everything?
Sorry, the whole. I would say the whole food, right?
Well, what are the other foods there that we are talking about? Right. So the other gidim are forbidden. And then the next part is going to contrast that. But what about the rotev?
So it's only if I feel the taste of the gidanashe.
Right. So basically, this is another example of well, we're going to see why is it forbidden? Why are all of those gittim forbidden? I can have a 10,000 gittim with one git and ashe. Why are they all forbidden? So that's the Gemara's question. If you read the next number 4, read number 4.
Can I ask something? Sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Why would they have the conversation with the Gidanashe if we know that it doesn't have a flavor?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. We're going to get to that, I think. But wait, Jacob, you want to say something? Jacob.
Oh, just be. Well, I think wouldn't it be that like the fat on the Gitanasha might give flavor?
Right. I think that's the idea. It's
The
problematic.
potato.
I mean, we can read this Mishnah different. We can read this is really a Mishnah. You could read it different ways. But yeah, I think that's what Jacob says is the way we're going to go. There's fat. Really, we're not talking about the git itself, but maybe the fat. That's one way. What's another possibility?
Right. I mean, also, and we end up saying the fat is like the Rabbanan make the fat usher, right? Like Doraita, only the gid itself is usher. So like Doraita, if you remove the gid, even like everything would be Doraita mutar, regardless of the shear, if you removed the physical gid itself, right? Like Durabanan, we say the Shuman has flavor, and so like we need to batel that. Right, but like even though it has no flavor, the actual physical gid itself remains usher, right? So that still becomes relevant in the Eno Makiro scenario.
Right. But in the case of Makiro, can anybody give a wild explanation of what could possibly be the Mishnah saying, and if it's not talking about the fat? And assuming that Giddim have no flavor? I mean, right, one option is to say Giddim do have flavor, but what's another wild? Yavni, what do you want to say?
I mean, the way they end up ruling is that like in a quantity that would give flavor if it were something else.
Right. You could read it that way. That's the way I would try to actually read it if I had no other context. I would say it's talking about a case where it would have given flavor, even though it obviously doesn't give flavor, but we're still going to apply a kind of measure. And that's in fact why the Gemara goes on to say, measure it as it's like onions and meat or something else, because you can't actually, which is essentially saying measured in 60, because there really is no flavor. It's kind of like we're creating imaginary isurim. We're machzik isura. No, we're not really machzik isura, but we're imagining that since it is asur, had it given flavor, how much would it forbid? That would be another like totally different way of reading it, but it's not suggested by anybody. Joel, you're uncomfortable? You have something to say?
Oh no, I think we've seen this already, where the measurement model overtakes the Tom model, right? In some ways, right? Even though theoretically it's based on the Tom model, we see that somehow it exists independently at the same time. So,
right. Okay. So it could be read like that, but let's stick with Jacob's way of saying the fat. Well, we don't know. Let's look at Rashi here. So Alish, keep reading Rashi. Doing great.
Reading the Gemara, okay? Velivtol beruva. So let it be.
Oh, sorry, the Gemara, yeah.
Right. So let it be batel in the majority, and the answer is Briah Shane. It's or Briah, let's say, or whatever. It's a distinct piece and it's different.
So here we actually do see the term Briah, if you're interested in tracking that. Yeah. So here we're saying it's a Briah, and therefore it's not batel. So here you see, I just want to make a very important distinction, which is that the makot cases, we're talking about when do you get makot? When do you get whipped for eating it, which is talking about Isser D'Oraita and about eating it. Now we're talking about an extension, which is saying that it's not batel b'rov because it's a Briah. And that is not a D'Oraita law. Because the right to law would be it's batel b'rov. Why wouldn't it be batel b'rov? Just like anything else, or batel noten tam, whatever you want to say. If it's dry, if it's not dry, but it wouldn't be never batel. So this is a rabbinic law, which is sort of influenced by the fact that the Torah says you're prohibited to eat it, even though it's very small.
Wait, how can you tell here that it's rabbinic? Or are you saying that from other?
Well, how can you tell it's rabbinic? Well, where does this Briah Shani come from? The Gemara is just saying Briah Shani. Did it bring a pasuk? I didn't see any pasuk. Actually, you could ask even better. Why? Where does this Mishnah come from? How do we know that you're chayav on an ant when it's not a shear? So the Tosfos is going to deal with this, and that's an interesting question. But I don't want to answer it yet. But I'm just saying. But here you see, there's no psukim given here, so it's probably D'Rabbanan. Maybe the first one is also D'Rabbanan. Well, it can't be. The first one can't be D'Rabbanan because you're getting makot. You're getting whipped for it, and that's talking about, I assume, D'Oraita. So anyway, seems to be that it's D'Rabbanan. But I think one of the I think Rashi or Tosfos says explicitly that it is D'Rabbanan. But it's clear that it's D'Rabbanan by context. Okay, so keep going out.
תשמע דאמריו, אכל ציפור טהורה בחייה בכל שהוא, במיתתה בחזאית, וטמאה בין בחייה בין במיתתה בכל שהוא. So coming. Here that this is the statement of Rav. If somebody ate a ritually pure bird while it was alive, like ever min achai, I assume, so then the piece you ate is like, you cannot eat it, but it would be forbidden like by anything, the chol shehu. If it was a nevela, so it would be kazait of the ber tahor, but in the case of ber tameh, whether it will be eaten as ever min achai or as nevela or whatever, so then again it would be bechol shehu.
Right. So we're basically distinguishing between like a chicken, let's say, a kosher bird, and like a raven or something that's not a kosher bird. And we're saying by a tzipor tahora, if you ate it whole, I mean alive, but kol shehu. So what do we mean by kol shehu and you're eating it alive? What does that mean?
It's like take a munch. There's just a bird.
You're eating a piece of it, you're saying.
Yeah, as in it's kosher. As in, like if I like bit off like a yay amount of live bird. Yes, sir.
It's aver minachai. Well, probably would have to be an aver. It would have to be an aver. Would have to be a aver minachai might not be. Wouldn't have to be like.
It should be more than kazai.
Aver minachai, to be fair.
What? Say again.
I say we play fast and loose with the definition of aver when we talk about aver minachai. Like, okay, fine. Like you bite off part of its like feet. I don't know. Like
well, a foot would have several bones in it, so yeah.
But logically, it makes sense. It would be less than kazait, right? Like very small.
Right. You could imagine a sparrow or something. But Joel, you wanted to say something? Do you have a different approach?
No. I just was gonna bring a smaller bird into this, but
what about a smaller bird?
I mean, that's there. You can even eat the whole thing whole, right? But
right. Bear in mind, that's another way of thinking about it. I don't know which is better. I tend to think of it as a whole bird, and that's why we're dafka talking about birds. We didn't talk about, why didn't it say achal para v'kol shehu chayav aver min achai? Why dafka bird? Because there's certainly animals that are kosher and not kosher. Like a wolf. No.
Are there birds that are smaller than a kazait?
Yeah, maybe they're certainly a baby.
The bones.
A baby hummingbird, a newly born hummingbird, would probably be smaller than a kazayit. A very small little, would be a bird, would be a Briah.
Is that kosher?
I don't think a hummingbird is kosher. Exactly. So that
then
would
it
be,
doesn't help us.
But maybe I see a pigeon, maybe a baby pigeon.
I'm scared. What makes you think that it's that you're eating the whole bird here? Because it says achal tzipor instead of achal mitzipor Torah.
Yeah. First of all, yes. First of all, you answered your question better than I. Achal tzipor tahora b'chayea b'kol shehu. You see, the kol shehu makes you think of a part of it. But when you see but kol shehu is it's just like the ant case, because I'm connecting to the ant case. The ant case is where you eat the whole ant, and here we're talking about eating the whole bird, and it's treif, obviously, it's aver min achai, it's nevela, it's all kinds of things, but it's dafka the aver min achai part that is going to give you the kol shehu. You see, that's the point. If it would be, well, whatever, that's the point, and that's the next part. But mitata, then it's nevela, so then it's then you need to eat a kazayit. So then you need to eat a shear.
To me, it seems that the language, like vemitata, right, goes against bechayeha. So we also don't assume that the vemitata is the whole thing. No, it's
yeah, the whole thing. It's also bemitata is also perhaps eating a whole one, but now it's dead before you started eating it. And now, if it wasn't the right size, if it was too small, you wouldn't be chayev a malkut. Be usher, but it wouldn't be chayev whipping, because it was a nevela and it was too small of a nevela, even though you ate the whole bird.
So you think it? Well, whatever. Okay.
That's what I think. It's not. I don't know if I don't. But let's see how important that is. If it's important, I'm not sure if it's important. But either reading might at this point work. Here, Jacob, can you read the Rashi?
Yeah, so B'chaya b'chol shehu mishum ever min achai ama lo be'inan be'kazayit. So because of ever min achai, we see that we don't need a kazayit.
Mishum means that the isser that you're invoking here is ever min achai, and then that's like a period, and then we see from that you don't need a kazayit.
Yeah. Okay.
What does it mean we see from that? We see from what? Sorry, I gotta get a drink. What does it mean? Alma?
I guess somehow at this point we're seeing that Aver min achai is somehow a different case, but is it just drawing upon the idea of the word Briah or Briata and what it like?
I think
no, but it,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it might just feel like a sort of common sense visceral reaction here. This is how I heard Revelation teach this material. Just that, the idea of like eating a tiny hummingbird is gross, right? Like, there's something viscerally disgusting about taking ever min achai that every Jew should internalize. There, Alma, kol shehu, of course you can eat it even if it's less than kazayit.
Right. I think he's just emphasizing. Rashi's emphasizing that the kol shehu is as opposed to requiring a kazayit.
Yeah, Rav Nachum, I think you have to read the Rashi as bechayea bechol shehu alma lo ba'inan be'kazayit. And what's the isur mishum ever min achai? Right? Rashi does this a lot of times where he'll like the mishum ever min achai is a parenthetical almost, and the alma goes on the bechol shehu and not on the
bechol shehu. Right. Bechol shehu. What does that mean? That you don't need a kazayit. Exactly. Yeah, agreed. Okay, Jacob, keep going.
Yeah, b'mita ta b'kazayit. The benevela achila ktiva v'chol achila b'kazayit bar me'ever min achai. Is this supposed to be Briah instead of Derab?
No, derabia. Derabia.
Derabia.
Derabia kra.
Oh, the copy Aver Lechude. Oh, so okay, so yeah, so instead of the Kazaya, since it's written Achila by Nevela, and
No. Oh, wait. The Nevela Achila Kativ. Right. In other words, we see Lo Tochal Kol Nevela. There's a pasuk
right,
like that. I don't know if I said it exactly right, but Lo Tochal Kol Nevela. You can't eat a Nevela. And it says Achila.
uh, yeah, and
That's like a
all use,
quotation.
right, and all use of the word Achila is with a Kazayit, except for Avraham Achai, that there's like an extra pasuk, and it like rules upon Aver individually.
Right. In other words, there's many, I don't know, extra or many psukim. I didn't really check, but there are many psukim about Eber Minachai. Apparently, of a copied Eber Minachai. The Torah is like goes out of its way to be very careful about Eber Minachai, and therefore we learn that even if it's smaller than a kazayit, a little bit. Wait, we're going to see Tosfos has a slightly different way of saying this, but so Rashi is saying that because the Torah has extra concern about Eber Menachai, we learn from that there's an Isser even when it's smaller than Achila. Achila, Achila has like been defined as a Kazai. But here it's even if you don't have Achila, you have this, even if it's less than Achila, it's still going to be Isser because the Torah was so interested in this Isser. Comments? Ilana,
I'm sorry, but can you just tell, like, what's one pasuk in the Torah, for example, where we learn not to eat Ever Minachai? I'm just trying to.
Oh, good question.
I think Rabia Crab might not
just
be
like-
that there are
I've
many.
just-
I think it might not be that there are many psukim, but that like the crowd did like a ribui, like the crowd.
Oh,
like
that it added.
Yeah.
I mean, they learn Ever Menachai from Adam Harishon, I think, like Min Ha'etz. But you're right, it doesn't seem to be many. You're right. So maybe I'm wrong
I
there.
think the point
just-
is that, right, like with Nevela, there are in fact many psukim about Nevela, and they talk about Achila, right? That it's
right.
it's what constitutes Achila that is like Asar with Nevela, whereas with Ever, we learn it out from this specific kind of kapita on Ever Dafka. Not anything that constitutes Achila.
Or I'll go with what you said also, or Alexi, we said, in other words, there's an extra, what's the extra limud? In other words, we would have said Ever Menachai is Asar anyway, because it's not shechted. It didn't have, zoveach. You're violating, you have to do zevach. You have to kill the animal. So we would have known anyway that you have an isser to eat a live bird because you didn't do shchita. So obviously it's usher. It's a nevela. It's certainly a nevela as you're chewing it, So
But it's not a nevela because
it's not a nevela when you put it in your mouth. You're saying.
Well, depending on if we think it's the whole bird or part of the bird, but either way.
Well, if it's a part of the bird, then for sure probably.
I feel like you can't call it a nevela. Like I think that the point that you're eating it, it's live, and I think to say like it becomes nevela in the seconds in your mouth between when it like dies and is digested feels not like how we use that term probably.
Well, still we have a pasuk that is a positive command to do zvicha, to do slaughtering. So we seem not to be doing that here. Wait, so somebody found verses for us? Joel, you found verses? Joel, somebody found?
Yeah, in Devarim Yud Bet, Rashi even comments there. It's like rak chazak levotia chol hadam ki adam hu nafesh velo tochal nefesh im basar. Nefesh im basar is understood by Chazal as being ever min achai. And then the next verse is lo tochlenu, and the next verse is lo tochlenu. I think that's the ribui that's going on there. That it says it multiple times. lo tochlenu is saying that even less than kazait. That's my
and it also says in Sifrei lo tochleinu lerabot basar. Oh, that's what it's lerabot basar v'chalav. So it's the ribu is for basar v'chalav. Sorry, so I just
basar b'chalav, and not for aver.
Language is for basar v'chalav.
Well, Rashi says what he's the Rabia Krav Kapid Abiria Lechudya. Right. Rashi, it's a good question. I mean, so Joel, where do we stand? Do we have an extra pasuk?
I think it's those 3 psukim where it says 3 times. I mean, it's also talking about the dam, so it's hard to unravel the whole thing, but that it says 3 times lo tochal, lo tochlenu, right? It sounds to me like there's an extra emphasis beyond just stam achila, which is kazait going on there. So
okay. So fine. So we're
okay. Sorry.
Well, Alice, you want to say?
No, I just want to say I looked at it again, and it seems to me that in the Sifrei they derive it specifically for Bnei Noach, and for Bnei Noach it's from a different pasuk. So and then they ask like, is there something which is forbidden for Bnei Noach, but it will be allowed for Israel? And they say, yes, there is. What do you talk about? The Efat Toar, they say, yes. So they say, so we have an extra pasuk, lo tochelu hanefesh in basar, because I think for Noach, it's ach basar benafsho damo lo tochelu. I think it's so they bring, I think, an extra pasuk.
Great. So what's your conclusion?
That's the ribui. I think, in my opinion, like a different pasuk. I don't.
Okay.
Maybe. Who knows?
You guys did more research than I did.
Sorry, I just have a question. It wasn't clear for me. How do you translate this? Ever lechudia.
Ever lechudia on the. It's a good question. On the
ever by itself.
By it, lechudia means by itself. Does it mean
as
that the aver is by
to
itself,
nevela,
or
right,
as opposed to nevela?
As opposed to nevela.
I agree. Yeah. In other words, there's a special kapeda specifically on aver minachai. There's some kind of extra thing, perhaps because there's several. There's a ribui to specify it. But you see, the problem with saying it's a ribui to specify it is then say, so fine, it's an isser. So that's just how we learned that there's an isser. But the isser should still be achila, and it should still be kazayit. The fact that it's just a pasuk that teaches us it is not a proof. You have to say that there's an extra, that there's like a double pasuk. There's not just one pasuk, there's 2 pasukim. And then we can say, and that's why I said it's ribui rabia. It can't just be there's this pasuk that teaches us it, because this pasuk that teaches us everything. And then we would say the achila is the achila of kazayit. It has to be some kind of extra kapeda that the Torah is showing by maybe having an extra limud, or maybe having both what Alish says and what Joel says. It's a good question. I didn't really research it. But Rashi says that there's some kind of extra kapeda. Jacob, read the next Rashi.
So, Tmea ben b'chaya ben b'mitata b'chol Chayev Debiria he v'lo tzricha shior k'tanam be'eluhein halokin. Lochel nemela kol shehu chayev mishum shehi riyata kibriyata. Alma viria.
Wait. So wait, stop. So wait, okay. So Tameya bein b'chaya bein b'kol shehu. So why is it b'kol shehu?
Like, you're chayev because it's a biria, and you don't need any.
Right, this is where I got the idea that it's a whole bird. In other words, the Seifa is clearly talking about a whole bird because it's a biria, and biria means that it's as it was created by God. So it's eating a whole bird. So also the Reisha is talking about a whole bird. So the biria heat. So the Tameya is a forbidden bird.
It could theoretically be different when, like, if I bite a chunk out of a live bird, I am eating from a whole bird, right? As in, like, it's not that, like, a piece of that fell into my mixture and whatever. It's that, like, the Isra I'm interacting with is a whole bird, and I happen to have bit off a mashahu of it. Does that make sense? That feels different than like a piece unto itself.
I
That is
think that's
already
also
separated.
I think that's also true for nevela, that you wouldn't have to eat the entire bird for it to be when it's asa
Sure.
b'mashu, as long as you take a
But
bite
who
out of
says
the
an avail is
hummingbird.
asher b'mashu? Why is you saying an avail is asher b'mashu?
No, so long as it's a birya. If you have a whole hummingbird and you take a bite out of a dead hummingbird, it's still a birya.
That's an interesting question.
Like
I'm not sure you're right.
The whole thing, like,
But if you
because
chopped it in half and ate it by half and half, then you would not be.
because the thing that you're eating from is a birya, it would be like aser do right in the kol shehu.
Wait, but why
I
couldn't you
don't
make
think
the
that's
same
right.
thing about the nevela, that it's right? Like, there's no distinction in the language. The distinction isn't that it's a biria, whatever.
I don't think that if you ate a half an ant and then ate another half of the ant, you would be chayav of birya. You would only be chayav if you ate the whole ant in one go. That's what we're saying.
I think only if the ant had already been cut in half would you not be chayav. But if you
You're
took
saying
a
if I
bite
cut
out of
the if I cut the bird in half,
ant and I like munch half of it off while it's from its whole body, that would be birya.
not sure. I don't know where you get that. Maybe you're right, but I don't know where you know that from. You'd have to show me a source for that. Yeah. Maybe you're right. I don't.
Well, then why it wouldn't need the phrase kolshu, right? It could just say ba'ochal nemela.
No, because you might think that only if I eat like a large bird would I ever be chayav on Briah. In other words, would I ever be chayav on
Okay, but like,
in
is
other
an
words,
ant ever a kazait? Like, I think probably they're
that's the whole point. That's the whole
no,
point.
but that's why I'm saying is that like it could have just said eating a whole ant, and
No, but
I
it
would
wants
have
to give a
known.
rule. It doesn't want to. It's not specifying. It's saying. Wait, let's look at the Rashi again. Tameya, a tame bird, bein b'chaya, bein b'mitata, b'kol shehu. Chayev. You're chayev when you eat a kol shehu, de biryahi, because it's a birya. So even if, but it can't be a birya if you ate half of it. It's a birya if you ate it all, but it wasn't a kazayit. Right? You ate the whole thing in one go, but it wasn't a kazayit. It was a small bird.
Even if it wasn't a kazayit.
Right. Even if it was, and if it was a more than a kazayit, then for sure you'd be chayiv on eating the tamea bird. It's treif. It's tamea. So you'd be chayiv if you ate the kazayit because of eating tamea. You ate tamea. The chiddush is that when it's even though it's smaller than a kazayit and it's whole, it's whole. Now you're going to be chayiv also. But if you chopped it if you ate it over the course of dinner, in many, slowly, or if you chewed it, if you bit off, I don't think holding your hand is very different from cutting it with a knife. I don't see that distinction. But once you put it in your mouth and start chewing, if you put it whole in your mouth, then you're b'chayiv, even though it wasn't a kazayit. Whereas if it was a nevela, which means if it was a kosher bird, but they was shechted improperly, and you started eating it whole, so you would not be chayiv if it was very small. Be usher, but it wouldn't be chayiv. That's the way I read it.
So it's impossible for a para to be a beria.
Right. Well, unless you're very big, you couldn't eat a para in one go. Yeah.
Also,
that's why we're talking about namela and a bird, because those are things that are conceivable to be less than a kazayit and still a birya.
Also, to add to the possibility of birds being possible, because we had some discussion about that, I wonder if it would be considered complete even without feathers, because birds can be a lot smaller without feathers.
That's a good question.
Get into the feathers. The feathers come up later.
It's a good question. I would assume that yes, even if you took off the feathers, that would still be a birya. I mean, that's a good question. I really don't have any. I don't have the equipment to answer you.
Well, I'm
but I
just
would.
making a
My gut
comment
tells me.
because
Yeah.
we were debating whether it would be possible to eat a bird in one bite. So without feathers, it might be a lot more possible.
That's true. But like I gave a case with a very small hummingbird. But yeah,
But we rejected that because hummingbird wouldn't be that would be Nevela anyway.
With Tmeha.
But that's what we're talking about. Tamea. Bein b'chayeh. We're talking in the case of Tamea. Hummingbird is Tamea. Bein b'chayeh, bein b'mitata.
Right, but we were also talking about Achal Tzipor Teora B'chayea.
Yeah, but I'm now in the Rashi here. And the Rashi says Tamea is a birya. And that's why you're chayiv when it's small. It's like a hummingbird. You're asking Haya. So I said a pigeon, a baby pigeon. If you want a live tahor bird, a baby pigeon. There are enough birds. In the Bible, somebody once pointed out that there's only one word for fish in the Bible, dag. Even when Yonah gets swallowed by a whale, it calls it a dag gadol. There's only one word. Why? Because the Jewish people, where did they live? In the mountains. They didn't really live on the seashore. So they had only one, there's fish, just fish. But they have many, many words for birds because they saw a lot of birds. So there's no shortage of birds, and there must be some that are small, that are kosher. Maybe sparrows really are kosher. I don't know. Wait, let's just finish this Rashi, and then we got to go. So, go ahead.
So, yeah. So as we learned in Elokin.
Shiur. Chayev Tiberiahi, and continue from there.
Yeah, and it doesn't need any specific measurement because it's non Elohim Halokin, Ochel Nebela, Kolsuhu,
Namala,
Kolsuhu, Suhu Chayev, Mishum Kebriata. So it's our as in our mission that we read earlier. Alma Biria Asura Becholsuhu. Avalav didn't Vela Leka Juve Mishum Biria Dikisa Nivrate Lo Haya Ola Shem Nevela Ilkach Allah Dinavela Lo Mechayev Ad Kazayat Katani Mihabit Torah Bechayev Becholsuhu. So we see that from this mission, we see that Biria is forbidden any amount. But it's not the case by Nevela, since we wouldn't make one chayav on Nevela because of Briah, because when it was created, it didn't have the name Nevela. So
he's asking a good question. Why don't we say it's a birya of Nevela? It's a whole thing, and it's a Nevela. So I should be chayav even if it's smaller because it's a birya, and the isser is Nevela. When do we apply the Isser of Biria? It's like Biria needs to sort of be a sort of wrap around another Isser. The other Isser can be Aver Minachai. The other Isser can be a Tame bird. But the other Isser can't be Nevela, right? There's no Isser of Biria. There's no Isser of Biria itself. There's only a cat. There's only a shiur called Biria, which can apply to another Isser, like I said, like Aver Minachai or a treifa bird, a tame bird. But it can't apply for some reason to why. So let's just apply it all places. Let's apply it to a nevela, to a bird that's kosher, but it wasn't shechted right. It's not Aver Minachai, and it's not Tame bird. So why don't we apply it there also? Apply Biria there. So what is Rashi's answer?
Well, since it wasn't created with the name Nevela, that's a later thing.
Right.
That it becomes Nevela.
whereas a Aver Minachai was created as an Aver Minachai. Kind of, you could say, well, it wasn't created. It's not called an. It's not created as an Aver Minachai. It's created as a Chai. But somehow Rashi's understanding that, I would even say that, does he really mean that it wasn't created like that? I would say that Rashi's sort of trying to get at something else. What is that something? What is that something else? If he's trying to, maybe I'm informed by what I read later. It's like there's a famous story of Aristotle, or there's a story I think brought in Diogenes Laertes, where he talks about Plato. It's not actually in Plato, and he says, Plato defines a man as a featherless biped. And so somebody comes in and brings a chicken. This relates to our topic, is birds. He brings a bird. He plucked all the feathers off of a chicken, and he says, "Here's your man, Plato. This is a man, a featherless biped. It's got no feathers." So you know what Plato's response is? Anyone knows what Plato's response is? He says, a featherless biped with broad fingernails. That in other words, that's just absurdity on top of absurdity. What's the problem with this definition? What's the problem with Plato's definition? Seems to work, but what's wrong with it? Why don't we like it? Why don't we like it?
It doesn't really capture the essence of what a human is.
Yeah, exactly. It's just completely dealing with ancillary attributes and not the essence of a thing. So I think that's what Rashi is saying. I think that's what Rashi is saying when he's saying, "Kishenivra lo haya aleh shem nevela." He means that's not the essence of it. You don't say this is a nevela. You say this is a cow or this is a bird. But somehow Aver Minachai is essential to something, and also being a tame bird is essential. Something like that. It's a little bit problematic. I don't quite understand Aver Minachai. If anyone has an option to tell me, I don't quite understand why you're born Aver Minachai. That's my attempt at an answer. All right, we'll continue next time with the next bit of the sources here, and we should finish next week. One more thing before we go. I'm thinking of dividing up not Siman 102 among the students. Are people interested in doing that? In other words, giving people simanim to prepare? Yeah? Okay. So maybe we'll do that for Siman 102. You don't have to, but if I get a quorum, then we'll do that. Okay, Shikoyach to everybody.
You want to look at the base Yosef or the Nasakalim for Siman?
Yeah, you should look at the Beit Yosef. I prepared it all, but I think what I'm probably gonna do next year is finish the sources and then go straight to the Shulchan Aruch. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn the Beit Yosef. You should learn the Beit Yosef. But I'm not sure if we'll go in. Maybe we'll go a little bit in the first Beit Yosef. There's not really that much Beit Yosef. But yeah, prepare everything. Prepare everything. There's not really that much. Prepare everything. Prepare all the shachs and the tazas, and the Beit Yosef. And there might be one Bach that we might look at. Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.